hindsight, looking back, do I look at it as an opportunity to learn about myself? Yeah, I do. And so could I create some reason for it having happened? Sure, I could. But at the time, it was completely spontaneous, caught me by surprise. As I said, I didn't even believe in reincarnation at the time. If you talked to me, Paul, about reincarnation, I said, yeah, that's cool, Paul. Where we go for lunch? I mean, I'd be polite about it, but I'd be kind of politely dismissive,
Absolutely.
But then it just started happening, and I started having these experiences. And I'll tell you about one that's not in my book. And the one that this book is mostly about helping people reduce their fears about death and dying. And most of the stories in here are about other people, not about me. I did not want this book to be about me.
What I'll do though, guys, if you're watching at home or watching this on catch up, at the end of the show, I'll create a caption so you can see the books and also where they're available. Okay, so look out for that as well. All right, guys.
Cool. But reason I pointed that out is because there's one story in there about one of my past lives, and the first one that I wanted to put out there in the public, public mind is the one about me being a slave. That's the one I talk about there, where I was a slave on a Carthaginian warship,
Wow.
I think about 2,300 years ago or something, where I almost died. And to your point, what did I take from that experience? I took from that experience the ability of my mind to will myself to stay alive, because I was on a piece of wreckage in the Mediterranean, whatever. And of course, when it first happened to me, I didn't know where I was or whatever. I could just see that I had very dark black skin. I was African, and I didn't know it was a Carthaginian warship at first. I started having visions of ships, and then I started looking up. Okay, when was that? And blah blah blah. That's how I triangulated and figured out that it was about. I think I was in the Punic Wars between Carthage and Rome, and I knew it wasn't a Roman ship because the Roman ships had this thing that I can't remember what it was called, some talon that would a piece of wood basically, that would go down and then with a metal beak on the end, which hook onto the other ship, and then the soldiers would run across it. Yeah. That was a major turning point in naval warfare in the Mediterranean. Well, I wasn't on one of those ships. I was on the receiving end. So that's how I kind of figured that out. My point, though, is when I almost died in that experience, in that lifetime, on a piece of wreckage, I willed myself to stay alive. So I've taken that will to stay alive, or that ability of my mind, to this lifetime when I've been laid off from my job 5 times since I was 50 years old. And how do I recreate myself? And so the strength of my mind is what I took from that one experience, for example.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Because I had similar experiences when I first started to meditate. Within 6 months to a year, I started to have visions. And again, you can't have this conversation down the pub with your friends because you'd be like, taxi.
Exactly. Yeah, no more alcohol for you. Anyway.
No, absolutely. So, but I always feel there is a lesson. There must be something our psyche or our higher self is trying to give us to help us to draw from, whether it's inspiration or whether it's literally healing and a healing aspect of that.
Yeah.
And I find that really interesting. But do you find those experiences they get richer? And for me, the experiences only last about 30 seconds. It's quick.
Yeah, it depends. But richer, yes. The length, it varies. But yeah, richer and more. I would say that as I relaxed into it more, this started happening in 1977 for me. More richer in the sense of more sensory experience.
Okay.
And so pretty much now, I've had glimpses of, as I said, a couple dozen lifetimes, and with all different senses. And some of them I've had all the senses involved. And so, like one of my Crusader lifetime, was in the Third Crusades, and I was 6'5", 230 pounds. That wasn't a piece of knowingness about my body size that I had initially. The initial thing was visual. So sometimes it'll come visually, sometimes it comes a feeling, and sometimes it's different. Sometimes it's just a knowingness. But that one was a vision when I was resting after I meditate. I always rest for 5, 10, 15 minutes after I meditate, and I was just lying down resting, and it's like the TV screen went on in my mind, and then I was walking into a stone building, and I looked down, I looked this way, and I looked that way, and it was big, huge stone blocks, stone ceiling, walls, everything. And there was nobody in the room. I walked into this big, huge room, and all the furniture had been pushed to the walls, but there was one piece of furniture in the middle of the room, and it was a full-length mirror. And I went to the mirror, and I knew I was big. I didn't know how big at this time. In the journey, I didn't know how big I was, but I was big because I filled up the whole big mirror, and I looked at myself. It's the first time, maybe the only time, I've actually seen myself and what I look like.
Yeah.
I was huge guy, red beard, long reddish hair.
Wow.
And specifically red. And so red is an unusual hair color. There's not a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then a full-length chainmail from head to toe with a white tunic and a cross. So and then immediately. So this, like you said, it was a very short experience. Like you said, it was probably. I mean, I wasn't timing this. I was just lying there. But if you were timing me or reading my mind or something, it probably only lasted, 45, 50 seconds or something. It wasn't a long experience, but it went boom, 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 like that, really fast. And I walked up to the mirror, saw myself. Immediately, I had knowingness that it was me. And then immediately after that, I had doubt. It wasn't even a thought. It wasn't even a thought. It was just a feeling of doubt, but I knew it was doubt, that I was doubting it was me. And then a millisecond later, energy shot from my feet up through my body and out through my head with knowingness. So the experience went in a millisecond. It went knowingness, doubt, knowingness, knowingness, doubt, energy, knowingness. And then I relaxed into it. And that was the end of that experience. So like you said, it was short but intense for me. That's one of the very first, that was probably the second time I had a past life memory. And then the slave one opened up after that. But much later, maybe, I don't even know. I tell my students now, and I tell the people listening, if you ever have experiences like this, do what I did not do. Write it down. I never thought I'd be talking about this. But so maybe it was 10 years later or something. I had this knowingness that in that lifetime, I was 6'5", about 230 pounds.
Wow. Yeah. Big guy.
Big guy. And then maybe 20 years later, in around 20, I don't know, maybe 20 years is the wrong, maybe it's 30 years later, around 2010, I was sitting in a hotel room with my daughter, who was in high school at the time, and we're meditating together. And in the middle of my meditation, and keep in mind, my kids have grown up with me. Yeah. Being this crazy guy having all these experiences. So this is nothing new, nothing unusual to them. In the middle of my meditation with her, I yell Saracens. I yell out Saracens. And I didn't know what Saracens was. I didn't know it was a noun, an adjective, what is it? And so I went and looked it up afterwards, and I yelled it out a bunch of times, and I looked it up, and Saracens is the word for Muslims. Muslim is a fairly new, recent word. Muslims is the word we use to describe people who, believe the religion Islam and so forth, Muhammad and all that, around 1300 AD to present. Before 1300, they were called Saracens. And I didn't know that, but my lifetime from the Third Crusades is around 1100, the late 1100s. Yeah. So I was like, whoa, so it's just a memory that popped out of Kelvin Chin didn't know, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And you talk about after you do your meditation, having that 10, 15, 20 minutes afterwards. Why is that? Because again, a lot of guys that watch a spiritual talk show, they'll be meditating, they'll be developing.
Yeah.
Why is that so much important? Because I've been guilty of just meditation done, on with my day.
Yeah. So yeah, two major reasons for that. Okay. So whether you do my meditation or any kind of form of meditation, doesn't matter. I always impart this little tip to everybody worldwide. You should be resting after you finish meditating.
Okay.
And resting means what? Resting means not doing whatever technique that you just was doing during your meditation.
Yeah.
So it's just resting. That's why I call it resting. And you just have your eyes closed, and you could be sitting or you could be lying down. It doesn't matter the position, but staying with your eyes closed, just letting your mind go, basically. That's why I call it resting. You're not doing technique or anything. And I have increased the rest period over the 49 years I've been teaching meditation to about, now I tell my students, 8 to 10 minutes at least, resting afterwards. Minimum 8 to 10 minutes. That's my standard. This is the sweet spot, I think. Now, it used to be much less, 2 or 3 minutes, even when I taught in the 1970s. But what I've seen over the years is that because the rest period, basically two reasons for the rest period. One, I call it runway, and the other is integration. Runway meaning what? Whatever you're releasing or balancing or psychically opening or getting rid of some stress or balancing your brain chemistry or whatever's going on in your nervous system or your psychic or your energetic system in your meditation continues after you finish. So you need a runway. You get momentum going, you take advantage of it.
Yeah.
And then the other reason is integration, meaning what? Integrating, making permanent the benefits of whatever you did do in you got started in your meditation.
Yeah.
You wanted to integrate into the fabric of your physical, emotional, mental, energetic, psychic, nervous system, whatever. Yeah. So those are the two reasons. And so what I've noticed over the decades that I've been teaching is, as I've increased the rest period, the exponential spike in benefits that my students have noticed outside of their meditation time in their waking state or sleeping or dreaming or whatever.
Interesting. So it sounds really positive. That I should certainly try that myself.
Yeah, and it's simple. It's just what are you doing? You're not doing it. It's just lengthening what the period of time, but you're not meditating, but you are still meditative in a sense.
So the term centering practice, is that a before or after meditation, or is it meditation itself? When we talk,
it depends on. There are so many there are thousands of meditation practices out there. There's probably hundreds of thousands, but what I teach is a technique that does not involve any control.
Yeah.
Two different things it does not involve that a lot of techniques do involve. So the way I teach, no controlling of the mind, in other words, and no concern about content. So most techniques fall into one of those two categories or a combination of the two.
Okay.
Where control, like concentrate on this, focus on the breath, control your breathing, count your breaths, in breathe this way, out, exhale this way, whatever. It's like all this controlling and manipulating of the mind or the body or whatever, any kind of control. And the other is, sometimes I refer to it as contemplative, but it's content oriented. You're visualizing something content-wise, thinking about love, thinking about peace, thinking about relaxation or whatever. Those are content oriented. And so what I teach is a non-content oriented and non-control technique. And what I have found is that it allows the expansion of the conscious capacity of the mind to happen much more easily, quickly, and effectively that way. It's really I credit Maharishi Mahesh Yogi for being the spiritual revolutionary guy in the world after millennia, thousands of years of meditation teachers coming through the planet. He's the first guy who said meditation can and should be easy and effortless. And I've taken the technique and made it even easier and more flexible, but I give him credit for being that guy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you've, I guess you've adapted that, have you? Or
Yeah, I've
in,
removed the cultural stuff, anything, because look, as I mentioned, I'm teaching across so many countries and cultures
yeah,
and stuff. You know, what I teach doesn't look Indian, doesn't look anything. It doesn't. It just, I've removed all that, and I've made it even easier and more flexible. 10 to 15 minutes each time, twice a day. That's all you need to do. You
yeah,
don't need to do it a long time. You know, hours and hours of meditation. You know, some people do that, and I'm not saying don't do it, but
yeah,
uh, the way I teach the technique, it's not necessary. Look, I've taught clergy from every major religion in the world. I've taught Buddhist monks, priests, nuns, every minister of every denomination, Muslim imams, et cetera, et cetera. And and I don't tell them to change what they're doing. The monks go back and they're still doing their Buddhist meditation at the monastery. But I tell them when they came to for me to teach them, I tell them, do this first, do what I teach you first, and then don't mix the techniques and do your other thing. They would all come back and say they get more out of their Buddhist meditation now after they're doing what I taught them.
oh, interesting, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm definitely going to sign up, Kelvin. Okay, so I'm really interested because meditation is such a useful tool, not just for spiritual development,
Sure.
not just for contacting, but from a medical point of view. You know,
Absolutely.
and
No,
so many. Yeah,
increases T cells,
yeah,
C cells. Those are anti-cancer cells. I mean, increases brain cell production in the hippocampus part of the brain,
yeah,
which is memory, emotional balance. You know,
yeah.
good stuff. So yeah, absolutely.
Have you ever come across the condition where people can't actually use their imagination? It's blocked, or it's actually, I can't remember the actual medical term. Is there something you could do for them, or
Well,
you could?
in fact, I can't mention names, but there is a writer who had writer's block. He's famous. I sat and meditated with him. I remember it was, I don't know how you remember, why do you remember certain crazy things like the appointment was always at 3:30 in the afternoon.
Okay.
And he would come and I'd sit with him and we meditated together. He had already learned to meditate,
Yeah.
I'd already taught him, but he had this writer's block. And I have a number of writers. I have actually a really close friend of mine who is also a writer, and I've helped him as well with his writer's block. But this guy, who I'm referencing, whose name I can't mention,
Yeah.
yeah, I sat with him for, I don't know if it was a month or 2 months or something like that, and then boom, he finally got past his writer's block, and yeah, he's like, world known now. Yeah.
Oh wow. Oh wow. That's awesome. So is it a fear again that's happened? Is it a creative fear? Is it, you know, with people like that, they get into this point where they just like, it's not happening, or why am I not connecting, or
Yeah, it's really it's impossible to isolate and say, well, it was this or it was this. It was it. If, to me, I look at it kind of. It really doesn't matter. My goal is the result. Can I help people move forward with whatever? But it's a combo platter of who knows what the heck. It could be brain chemistry imbalancing. It could just be energy, more abstract, energetic, or even
yeah,
be more abstract. It could be some past life emotional pattern that I would never even be able to identify for them, and they may not be even believe in past lives.
yeah.
And it could be that it doesn't really matter because we're living in the present. How can we deal with it now and move forward?
The question I was going to ask from a personal view,
Hmm.
when I've been meditating in the past, sometimes I fall asleep. Is that a particularly bad thing?
No. No, it's a good thing. I mean, it's not a bad thing. If you fall asleep, you fall asleep. It's because why? It's because your body needs it. So
Yeah,
I'm all about going with what our body, mind, emotions, energetic system needs at that particular moment. What's that? Well, whatever it is, it is. I
yeah,
mean, you fall asleep, you fall asleep. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And that a lot of people tend to worry about that. Oh, I didn't get anything. I just keep falling asleep. It's
Yeah,
because
it's a
where you're
mistake.
at.
It's a
Yeah,
mistaken understanding. I get into a lot of explanation in my classes about the neurophysiology of and explain why things happen. And I also explain in detail in my classes why I give a certain instruction. a lot of people, teachers will just say, here's what you do. Here's this. And you ask them why. And some of them will stumble because they've never even thought about why. Somebody told them that that's what they're supposed to teach.
Yeah.
I've thought, you can tell I'm a thinker. I have thought about things from every angle because I have an emotional need to understand stuff. I'm emotionally driven that way. Not everybody is. But as a result, when you ask a question, or anybody asks a question in my meditation or any of my classes, where it's my afterlife classes that I teach or my meditation classes or whatever, I know the other 6 or 8 questions that are within your question because I've thought about that or I've heard and learned as a teacher from my students.
Yes.
When they ask me questions.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I was going to say to you as well with your meditation, do you connect with spirit, as in, are you inspired with ideas? You know, what to do, where to go, who to help, that kind of stuff. What sort of program to create?
Yeah, personally, I am. Is that what you mean, personally? Yeah. And anybody could be, but yes, I am personal. I have been personally. Now, is that the goal when you are doing the technique? No. So see, that would be content. That's an example of a distinction here. So when you're practicing the technique as I teach it, that is not, we go in with no anticipation, no expectation. Okay. But is that a possible result that could happen yes. Yeah. That create, it's not only just being creative, but there's an alignment thing too that you're alluding to, right?
Yeah, because so many people have expectations, don't they, when they meditate?
Yes.
And they expect to, I've been, forgive me for using this as an example, but I've been to classes, development classes, where they'll come back and they'll say things. I rode on a dolphin, I flew across a rainbow, landed in a crystal waterfall, and I'd be like, wow, well, they got their money's worth. I didn't get anything like that,
Yeah, you're right.
And some people feel that they're failing at what they're doing because they're not focusing on, like you said, the technique, rather than not having that kind of content. Just focus on the technique.
I say content schmontent. I mean, it's a big deal. I mean, it's like, okay, I don't want to throw water on the person's passion who just had that experience of right on the dolphin's back, and then like the waterfall, a rainbow, and a crystal, this and that and the other. Okay, fine. That's fine. If that's their genuine experience, great. All power to them. But that's fine. Enjoy it, but move on. So here's a quick analogy. This is in this book. This analogy I'm going to tell you real quickly. It's on page 193. Read that essay. It addresses exactly what you're talking about.
Brilliant.
Okay? I call it spiritual materialism. It's this notion of materialism and getting hung up in a specific experience. And we think about materialism financially, but this spiritual materialism is the spiritual communities are rife. They are full of spiritual materialists who go, well, I had this amazing experience. That's okay, you had the experience, but don't go looking for it again, because it's going to lock you in to that one room in your 100 million or your 100 billion room castle, which is your mind.
Yes.
So don't get locked up in the dolphin, rainbow, crystal room. Move on to the other one of the other 100 billion rooms. That's what I teach my students, is how to unfold ourselves to ourselves without limitation.